Good afternoon, DEC members. Happy Thursday. I'm Steve Grigorian, President and CEO of the Detroit Economic Club. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. And if you haven't already, please mute your audio and video. A couple of quick announcements before we get started. I want to take a brief moment to thank the 120 terrific DEC sponsors for their continued support of our mission. And I also want to thank our friends at Detroit Public TV for live streaming our meeting today. Be sure to get your tickets for our next two upcoming speakers. Next Tuesday, October 20, we'll be hosting Charles Evans, President of the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago. And on November 11th, CEO of Johnson & Johnson, Alex Gorski, will be with us. And as you know, his company is racing for a COVID vaccine. I do want to offer a very special welcome to 16 high schools who are always near and dear to the DEC. Too many to name, and we're happy you've joined us today. Here's the format for today's meeting. I'm going to interview our guest speaker for 20 minutes. And for the final portion, we'll get to questions that you submitted via email. We want you to submit more questions real time via the chat room. And once we say goodbye to our guest, we hope you'll all stay for a 15-minute virtual networking session. The DEC's got an incredible history of speakers, as you know, and we love to share it. October 15th is a very popular date in our 86-year history. Our speaker today now joins a distinguished list of 20 other speakers who addressed the DEC on this date. A few highlights: 1976, then presidential candidate Jimmy Carter addressed the DEC. 1991, Ross Perot on this date. In 2002, Granholm and Posthumous did a gubernatorial debate. And just 2 years ago, Debbie Stabenow and John James were here for their senatorial debate. And today we're pleased to add Sal Khan as our 21st speaker on this day in DEC history. So let's get started. Sal is the founder and CEO of Khan Academy, a nonprofit organization with a mission to provide a free, world-class education for anyone, anywhere. Sal's been profiled by 60 Minutes, featured on the cover of Forbes, and recognized as one of Time's 100 most influential people in the world. He holds 3 degrees from MIT and an MBA from Harvard Business School. It's his first visit to the DEC. So Sal, great to see you. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Great to be here, Steve.
Let's jump right in and let's get started by asking you about Khan Academy's mission and how this all got started.
Yeah, you know, it's a pretty circuitous journey that I've been on the last 16 years or so. You know, my original background was in tech and in math, and then I go to business school. I end up as an analyst at a hedge fund in Boston. And it was about a year out of business school. I had just gotten married, and my family was visiting me from New Orleans, which is where I was born and raised. And just came out of conversation that my cousin Nadia, who was 12 at the time, was having trouble in math. And because of that, she was put into a slower math class. And so, you know, I talked to her, and she says she has trouble with unit conversion. I said, I'm convinced you can learn unit conversion. So I say, how about when you go back to New Orleans, I'll tutor you over the phone or over instant message or whatever we could use. And she agreed. And slowly but surely, I got her past her, you know, unit conversion, got her caught up with her class, a little ahead of her class. At that point, I became what I call a tiger cousin, and called her school, said, you know, I really think Nadia Rahman should retake that placement exam. They let her. But long story short, that she went into a kind of an advanced track. I started tutoring her cousins. Word spread in my family that free tutoring was going on. And I started writing software for them so that they can get as much practice and feedback. And that was the first Khan Academy. And then a friend suggested, why don't you make some videos, upload them onto YouTube for your family as well. I thought it was a horrible idea. YouTube's for cats playing piano, but I gave it a shot anyway. And, you know, it's my cousin's family. She told me they like me better on YouTube than in person. But even more relevant is that people around the world started using it, people who are not my cousins. And by 2009, there was about 50 or 100,000 folks using it every day. I was having trouble focusing on my day job, frankly. And that's when I set it up as a not-for-profit with a mission of free world-class education for anyone, anywhere. And, you know, that next year was hard. I didn't get any funding. We were living off of savings, et cetera. But by 2010, we were able to become a real organization. And, you know, you fast forward to today, you know, where we have over 100 million registered users. During COVID, it's about 30 million users a month, half in classrooms, half outside of classrooms. You know, and our goal is to give world-class learning materials from pre-K all the way through core of college, to make it personalized, to meet you where you are, and envision a world where, no one is kept from their potential as long as they have just, some simple device access and internet access.
That's amazing. Sal, talk about Khan Academy usage since the pandemic began. You touched on it in your opening remarks, but really interested to see what's happened since February, March.
Yeah, we first caught wind that we were going to be important in February when we saw some extra usage in Asia. I remember getting a letter from a teacher in South Korea saying that they were using us when their schools were closed nationwide. And I remember thinking, how wild is that? A whole country closing its schools. And then the very next week, out here in California, a local private school had to shut down because of contact tracing. And this was when there was probably, I don't know, maybe 20 confirmed cases in the country. But that was when it first came on our radar that, wow, maybe this happens in the US. And if it does, I think it's going to be us that a lot of people are going to lean on, because people are going to need something that's free, that's accessible, that works for a classroom context and an at-home context. It's comprehensive, has efficacy studies behind it, trusted. And so we started immediately, stress testing our servers, putting out scheduling webinars to help train parents and teachers on how to do this, putting out learning plans. And then that week that we all remember when the schools started closing down around the country, we saw our traffic, in a normal school day, we were seeing about 30 million learning minutes per day. We saw that grow to about 80, 85, 90 million learning minutes. So about 250 to 300% of normal. Parent and teacher registrations were 10 to 20 times normal. And, we've just been trying to keep up with that and trying to accelerate as much content and support and services as we can to keep everyone learning.
It's amazing. Can we talk about the digital divide and distance learning in general? And then also follow up to that, what is, in your opinion, distance learning doing to inequality in this country and worldwide?
Yeah, I wish I could I tend to run as a very optimistic person, and I am optimistic in the long run. But, I'll be very frank, this is a very bad situation that we've been going in. And obviously, it's because of realities of the virus. But this is a year where it's suboptimal for everyone. But I think especially kind of, the bottom 50 percentile of income, especially probably the bottom quartile, I think is going to fall further behind. There's a lot of talk these days of a K-shaped recovery. And, it took me a while to grok what a K-shaped recovery is, but, really it's a less than sign. And people are talking in economic terms that some people who work in tech, who can do remote work, they're doing just fine. But obviously a lot of service workers, a lot of people who might work in travel, or, they're hurting very badly, probably worse than they ever have in their life right now. And I think something very similar is happening in education where, it's for my family, for a lot of upper middle class families, obviously this isn't optimal, but we have the internet access. The schools are very tech savvy. Myself, my wife, my mother-in-law, we all live in the house. We're able to support our kids. We have multiple devices in our house, so our kids have been able to stay engaged. So, I think our kids are going to do just fine. And I think there's actually even pockets where people are realizing that they're enjoying the flexibility of it. They're able to cater to their students' needs even more. You're hearing about these pods and all of that. But as you're alluding to, there's a large chunk of the population, in Detroit public schools we work very closely with, 30, 40, 50% of kids don't have adequate internet access at home. There might be a cell phone or there might be some device, but now the whole family's at home and there might be 2, 3, 4 kids at home. They can't just share one device, especially if distance learning is expecting each of them to spend many hours using a device of some kind. So step one is closing the digital divide. We're seeing more energy there than we ever have. So that might be a silver lining. Step two is even when the digital divide is close to closed, kids need more support at home. And so there, we're seeing good examples. We saw some schools in Maryland where they're distance learning. The teachers are at home, but they're bringing that 5 or 10% of kids who need the supports, who need the free lunch, who need everything to come to school. And they have some adults who can kind of give them that supportive environment that a lot of parents are able to do for the bulk of students. So it's going to be a tough year. The learning loss, you have learning loss every summer where not only do you not learn for summer, you forget probably 3 months of the previous year. This year, the average learning loss could easily be a year's worth, and that's average. So if it's a K, half the kids might learn just fine, not have any learning loss, while the other half could have fairly dramatic learning loss.
That's incredible. Sal, I'm just kind of laughing here. I don't know if you could tell, but there was a fire alarm going off in our building. So I'm going to hope it's false. I'm going to continue on.
And we don't hear it, but yeah, your safety first. If I'll tell you if I see smoke.
Yeah, we're good. Thanks. So we've got a few minutes left before we go to audience questions. And we promised our members we'd get into some virtual learning tips. Many members on the Zoom with K through 12 children are experiencing varied degrees of virtual learning success. What pointers can you give to parents to help them make sure their students get the most out of this virtual learning experience?
Yeah, and I'll answer your question, but I'm really worried now over your safety.
I think we're good. It's kind of a frequent occurrence. I think we're
okay. Okay, this is nothing is worth. No, but from a parent point of view, what we saw in the spring is a lot of parents were worried that not enough was happening for their children, and now in the fall we're actually seeing the opposite. A lot of parents feeling stressed that too much is happening and that they're not able to keep up with it all. And what I've been telling folks, and I tell this to myself and I tell this to my wife from the beginning, we remind ourselves that really, if your child is able to continue to progress and not atrophy in math, reading, and writing, they're going to be fine. And if math, that's where Khan Academy already has very comprehensive content, very comprehensive practice. If kids are able to spend 20, 30 minutes a day consistently, and for younger kids, it might be 15, 20 minutes a day. For older kids, maybe 2 sessions of 20 minutes a day. They're not only going to keep up, but they're going to continue to actually progress, and in some cases might even accelerate because it'll be more personalized for them. And we have many efficacy studies there. So that's 20, 30 minutes. If they're able to do 20, 30 minutes a day, read a magazine, read a newspaper, talk about it at lunch, talk about it at dinner with your kids, read the same articles with them, it's going to be very compelling for them. And they're going to be maybe more engaged than they might be in a traditional environment. On the writing, ask them to write an opinion piece once a week about something. How should the chores be done in the house? Or should schools be open? Or do some journaling, 20, 30 minutes a day. Just that. And what I just described is about an hour and a half a day. I think your children are going to be just fine. And so if you're overwhelmed right now because of there's 3 hours of Zoom and you're having to help your kids, especially younger kids, submit assignments, talk to the school about it, because I think right now schools feel pressure to do a lot and they're redlining. At the same time, parents are feeling pressure to do a lot. Call your school, have a respectful is the key. There's a lot of stress now, and it's very easy to kind of project that stress onto other people. But the teachers are doing heroic work right now. But if you tell the teacher, look, you're doing an amazing job, but I think there's an opportunity where, I want to figure out a way to lighten your load and lighten my load. So I think those types of conversations, very open filter, would be welcomed. And I think everyone's open to having it right now. And what I just talked about, kind of an hour and a half a day, 20, 30 minutes a day, that's, I think, even doable outside of COVID times. Do it over summer, do it over breaks, and even maybe do it over, some school days. And that's the kind of thing that really ensures that your kids are going to not just not fall behind, but have really strong foundations.
Thanks, Sal. I had to unmute myself there. So we've got a great group of high school students on our Zoom today. How can they maximize this time in their lives?
So, if I was a high school student, I think at any point in our lives, and I remember this in high school, there's all the stuff that you want to do. And COVID, and usually you're saying, oh, I would love to learn to paint or play the guitar or, talk to my grandparents more, or start an effort to help people, but I don't have time. I have to go to, soccer practice, and I'm on the honor society, and I have to do this and that. COVID has, for better or for worse, it's taken a lot off of our plates. A lot of the stuff that we used to love to do that was taking a lot of our time, we can't do anymore. You're not able to participate in the extracurriculars like you were before. You're not able to socialize in all the ways that you were before. I encourage, try to do it as much as you can, but it has put constraints. And so view that as kind of a glass half full, is that this could be an opportunity for you to take that time and that focus it on some of these other things that you always said, I never had time for. And there's nothing like a crisis, as I think it was Winston Churchill, maybe I'm misquoting him, but, never waste a good crisis. which is during times of crisis, that's also the biggest time for opportunities. I remember when I was in high school or in college or even a young professional, I always had this craving to maybe make a little bit of a dent in the universe. And I didn't know what it was, whether it was I was going to start a business or make a discovery in something, or make some creative work. But I think many people, we always want to crave some form of expression, but it always felt like, oh, well, all the problems have been solved, or there's a lot of smart people who've already solved that problem. Why me? But right now during COVID, and it's not just because of COVID, but it's the economy, where obviously the country is grappling with issues of race. We have the education crisis. There's so many opportunities for young people to step up and do really interesting things to help other folks. I have a separate effort from Khan Academy, which I just spawned up from the COVID crisis, called schoolhouse.world, which is a place where students who need help, who need tutoring, can participate in live group tutoring sessions for free, done by volunteer vetted tutors. And you as a student are encouraged to be a tutor yourself. So once again, you can sit from your bedroom and tutor kids. I did a session the other day, and there was a student from Ghana, there was a student from Pakistan, a student from England. And so what could be a more fun way to connect? And also, if you tell colleges or employers, yeah, I'm an algebra tutor or I'm a calculus tutor, no one's going to question whether you know that material. That's the best. We don't view that as a credential today, but if you think about it, it is actually the ultimate credential, that you know how to teach a subject. Because not only does it mean you know the material, but it shows that you can communicate, you can empathize. So I would just encourage students, there's just so much you can do, and it's all at your fingertips. At no point in history have young people been this empowered, because what I was doing with Nadia back in 2004, you can do right now, or you can do analogs in other domains.
Thanks. I think I'm unmuted again. And so last but not least, mad respect for our heroic educators who certainly have their share of virtual learning challenges. And we've got some of those educators on today's Zoom. What do you say to them?
So, the advice I have for educators is the same advice I have for everyone, for parents, is, it's stressful. You should recognize that stress. Frankly, your job is stressful even when we're not going through COVID. Anyone who's had to stand in front of a classroom of 30 kids for even an hour knows how hard that can be sometimes. But, if you're doing it for multiple hours at end, and then COVID has added, several curveballs all at once. And so what I remind teachers is, I think everyone understands that this is a hard situation. And so this is, once again, viewed as a glass half full. It's kind of thrown a curveball, but it's also, I think there's more permission than ever to experiment, to try new things, to fail, to question assumptions. I think there's no period in time where, your administration or parents are going to be, hopefully they're always understanding, but I think they're the most understanding right now. So it's a great time to try new things. And if you fail, that's okay. Fail forward, learn from it, tell your peers, yeah, I tried that, didn't quite work, I'm going to do something else. But in some ways it's exciting, because you can rethink, instead of an hour session with 30 kids, maybe you do 10-minute sessions, 6 10-minute sessions with 5 kids each. Ways to mix up what you do with the classroom, ways to lean more on kind of some asynchronous learning practice, things like Khan Academy. And then when you get on the Zoom, or eventually if you're able to do a hybrid learning, or when you get back in the classroom, you're able to have more human to human interaction, go into breakouts, do fun games, simulations, whatever else. And I also emphasize the same thing that I told the parents. I think less is more right now. This is a year where we shouldn't try to do everything. We should try to focus on the few things that really, really, really matter, and do those reasonably well. And then make sure there's a lot of cushion for all of us to just regenerate and kind of deal with all of the stressors that are happening. And, teachers need that, students need that, and parents need that. So that's my best advice.
Thank you, Sal. Now it's time to turn our attention, if you would please, to some of the audience questions we've received either via email or chat. So let me start with this one. Do you think elements of virtual learning will somehow remain even after all schools are back to meeting in person?
Yeah, I think so. Even before COVID, to be very clear, I'm oftentimes the poster boy for like online learning or whatever, but I'm always very clear, for my own children, for myself, or for anyone else's children, if I had to pick between an amazing teacher and no technology, and the most amazing technology, I would pick the amazing teacher every time. Give them stick and sand. I guess stick and sand is still very basic technology, but I would take that any day of the week. Now, ideally, we don't have to make that compromise. We could say, what are our pedagogical goals? And then what are the best resources we have to meet them? As I said, the teacher is the ultimate resource, but then every teacher also knows that in a class of 30 students, those 30 students have different gaps in their knowledge, the different levels of kind of a strong foundation. They're all ready to learn at different paces. But every teacher also knows, how can I cater to those 30 needs? I can't replicate myself 29 times. So they have to kind of go into a lockstep model. But now we have an opportunity, and this is where, we should never be using technology for technology's sake. But if we can use technology to meet the students where they are and to feel more empowered as educators, where you don't have to wait till the test 2 weeks later to know that some of your kids have massive gaps and then you have to move on to the next concept. What if in real time you could know where every student is? What are they missing? What are they getting right? Maybe you realize that some things you can move faster through, and other things you need to slow down, take 5 kids aside and say, okay, you're really having trouble with decimals, and this is a really foundational thing. Let's get this right for you. And while everyone else works at their own time and pace, or maybe find those 2 kids who really understand the concept and get them to tutor their peers, and give yourself some scale. So in my mind, pre-COVID, that was the type of thing that, when technology is used well, can unlock. It can actually make the human experience more human. And COVID has put a whole set of circumstances on us, many of them suboptimal. As I said, I would rather be in person with the teacher than have to do it all over video conference and all the screen time and all that. But it is making us ask some interesting questions about, how do we keep kids engaged? Once again, put them into breakout sessions, maybe, play with the duration, put some fun, Socratic dialogue in there, always be asking questions, pulling them out of the screen, cold calling. Well, some of those principles are going to make their way back into the physical environment, but also some of the principles of, okay, let's let students learn at their own time and pace. Let's make sure the learning isn't bound by time or space. Keep going on Khan Academy. In theory, we should be able to do that post-COVID. I think, it's very painful in the short term that a whole generation of educators, there's a lot of educators who are already leaning into technology, but now all educators over the last several months have been thrown into the deep end of the pool with technology. And it's incredibly, difficult. People are swallowing water and choking and all this, but they're for the most part, they're not drowning. And as uncomfortable and as imperfect as it is right now, it's going to be very powerful when we go post-COVID, because I think a whole generation of educators are going to say, okay, what makes sense? They shouldn't use technology for technology's sake, but what makes sense for me? And if any of them had a fear of technology, I think that fear will be lower now because they've been using it for a year through COVID. I think you're going to see a lot more personalization. In fact, I think we're going to have more personalization, because post-COVID, to the earlier point, there's going to be even larger variance in students' engagement, that K-shaped recovery that we talked about earlier. And so I think when we get back to normalcy, it's going to be like a post-war or post-disaster type, post-earthquake or hurricane rebuilding process. And so I think we can't just get back to normal. Oh, you're in 7th grade now. Okay, let's just go through the motions of 7th grade. It's going to be like, no, we just went through a little bit of a natural disaster in our education system. Not the educator's fault. It's because of constraints that were beyond their control. How do we rebuild? And I think we have to have a focused effort there, probably next school year.
Let me tag on to that. Question came in. Do you think the pandemic is pushing us into the future at a faster pace than normal?
I think it is. Like even outside of education, one obvious place is, this is probably something y'all talk about at the economic club, is the nature of work, and, how much work has to be in person versus remote. A lot of tech companies are already announced that they've gone to, in-person optional. I suspect Khan Academy might be going in that same direction as well. And I think people are asking similar questions in the education setting. And I think what the healthy part of this conversation is, people are unbundling. People are like, wow, school does a lot of things. It's the first time that I'm really hearing a lot of people say, wow, school does a lot more than I thought they do. Beyond making sure you cover the standards, they're a place for socialization, they're a place for assessment and credentialing. For a lot of places, they're a place for social services, they're a place for lunches, they're a place, the list goes on and on and on. They're even turning into telco providers in certain cases where there's examples of them distributing devices and sending school buses with Wi-Fi out there so that people can access it. And so I think that unbundling, people are starting to think about, well, maybe some elements of online, or maybe in certain cases, some elements of distance should persist. And people would not have thought this way had not COVID happened. So I think as we go back into normalcy, hopefully next year, people are going to say, well, we kind of liked that, we weren't bound. Like maybe there's a teacher at a school across town who's just completely nailed how to run a Socratic dialogue or the lesson or the lecture on photosynthesis. Why don't we film them and let them be the kind of canonical video for our district? And for that unit, the other teachers are in support. And then for the next unit, it might be another teacher who is kind of giving that will save teachers time and effort. And then now the whole district feels like one community as opposed to just a classroom or just a school. I don't know if that's a good idea, but it's an interesting idea, something to think about. The idea, there's a lot of parts of the country where kids don't have access to highly rigorous courses, or if they do, they're not at the level of rigor that you would expect. Some elements of distance learning. I would never want to go all distance learning for most kids. But if there are mechanisms that you can go and connect to a course that your school might not offer, that could be pretty interesting. One of the things that we're seeing a lot of schools doing, for my 6-year-old, our school has started doing in person in a very safe way with masks and COVID and ventilation and all the rest. But half of the families are still staying at home. And so a lot of schools are doing models now because of COVID, where some kids are in the classroom, but the kids at home are able to participate. That feels like a very low hanging fruit that we should keep forever, because now there's no such thing as, if you have the flu or something, stay home, but you're not going to lose school. And frankly, that's going to keep everyone else safer too. And so maybe the flu won't spread as much. But I think there's just a lot of really interesting things that we can keep doing. A lot of what we talk about Khan Academy, the personalization, the mastery-based learning, competency-based learning not being dependent on time and space, I think are going to only gain more momentum.
Two more real quick. Somebody just chatted. Colleen wants to nominate you for Secretary of Education. Are you in?
I think I would be better. I think I in the country would be better served by me being working closely with whoever the Secretary of Education is. I tend to, there's a lot of very important work there, but there's a lot of work of getting bills passed in Congress and budget allocations. My personality is much more suited to let's make more software content. Let's figure out how to reach more kids and drive efficacy studies and things like that. But I'm flattered that someone would suggest that.
Thanks, Sal. All right, so I saved this question. I thought it was juicy. So last one of the day, if you're in charge of the entire American education system and you were given a blank slate to redesign the entire K through 12 curriculum in the US with no restraints, what would it look like and why? In 2 minutes, go.
2 minutes is the important part. I would make it a competency-based system. I would sit and say, what are the competencies that really matter? I think some of the ones that we already have, I would persist. Algebra, I think you need in life. I think chemistry, physics, biology, solid reading comprehension, solid American history, civics, government, world history. I would then index even heavier on law. There's no reason why every student in the country shouldn't learn what a first-year law student learns, frankly, by middle or high school. I would do accounting. I would probably try to put some CS in there. But the key is that it makes it competency-based. So I would create a national way that folks can prove what they know in any of these areas, and it's nationally or internationally recognized. And then, for things like algebra or algebra 2, if you show mastery in it and you're recognized, that also gives you college credit, so that you don't have to go to college and then say, oh, do you get college algebra or not? Or you have to take remediation. No, you get it all at once. And I would also start to blend. I would make it so a lot of these courses, chemistry, physics, biology, statistics would be another one I add because it's useful in every domain. I'm talking super fast because I have a lot to add here. I would make you get credit for those things. And then for college credit. And then I would also I would unbundle the high school or the college diplomas so that you make it clear to employers, like, you don't need a big college diploma, that's fine. But what do you really care about? And you probably care about some subset of that. And then make that very clear to students and educators. Okay, if students are able to show mastery in A, B, and C, these types of employers are willing to hire them. If they show mastery in D, E, and F, then these types of employers will view them equivalent to a college diploma. And so something like that would really, streamline the process, and then unlock a lot of creativity on how do you prepare folks for that level of competency. And it makes the competency fixed, and what the variable is the how and when and how long, versus the system we have today where the time and the when is fixed, and then the variability is in the competency.
Sal, you're an incredible thought leader. Thanks so much for your enormous contribution to our world. We so appreciate your time today. Keep up the great work. We want you to come visit us in Detroit in person when we can do live events again today. So thanks again so much for being with us, Sal.
Thanks for having me. Look forward to being in Detroit, hopefully in the not too far future.
Have a great day, Sal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks to my team and to all of you for being with us. If you're staying for the virtual networking, just give us 60 seconds to organize things and let the others drop off. And so goodbye to those of you leaving us. Hope to see you next week when we host Charles Evans. Goodbye.